Listen. House's radio station, DWFM 92.3, also known as simply U92. Inside, we see Zan Paul Yu, a DJ who goes by the name Joshua Yu on the air. He is busy keeping tabs on what he will play next in his daily afternoon program, Count on You. We sat down and asked him about being a DJ and what it is all about. So, how long have you been in radio?
Oh, interesting question. I think almost as long as, no, probably longer than a lot of my students actually. 20 years back in February.
Ooh, so you first ventured into from what station?
I got my first crack at radio on FM back in February of 1989 in my hometown in Angeles City. It's a station called GV 99.1. I think now they call it GV FM 99.1.
So how were you introduced into radio broadcasting?
I was in between schools, transferring between two schools at the time. And the school I was moving from was trimestral. I was moving from LaSalle Taft to UP, and I had some time in between because the terms weren't synchronized. So I was back home, back in Angeles City. I think it was if I recall, I was on a Jeep ride home, and yeah, I had to commute back then. And they were tuned. The Jeep was tuned into that station, the only FM station in Angeles City, and they were advertising that they needed jocks. And I said, "What the hey? I put together a demo tape, and that's it." I was interested enough, and I thought I had some experience back in high school with hosting, public speaking, all that.
So before joining radio, have you ever been a listener of the medium?
Quite. Let's see. I think pretty much through childhood, and my parents. I would have to say I'd have to be thankful to my parents for developing my love for music, because they bought and collected a lot of records. My father had an old-fashioned record player, and he taught me how to use it. I also broke it, unfortunately, a few times, but that's how I got into it. And when I got to high school, when I was 13, I started paying less attention to my toys and more attention to, aside from my hair, the radio, and I was hooked ever since.
Being a DJ, no walk in the park. I mean, is there a set of requirements for one to become?
Well, I think I wouldn't say there's a strict set of requirements. For one thing, each radio station has its own set of principles or standards or maybe rules that they adhere to, and there are some general broadcasting rules that we all have to follow, and most of it in terms of being decent on the air. We have to, for the most part, try to be wholesome on the air. But I don't think there are any strict rules or requirements. I would have to say that as long as you have a good attitude and it's something that you are really interested in enough, if you really like radio.
Who do you look up to as a role model in the industry? Someone that helped you reach where you are today or inspired you to be one?
As far as broadcasters from, say, the U.S. are concerned, I would have to say I'd always been a big fan of Casey Kasem, who I believe is now retired. And, well, locally, I would have to say my mentor, Mr. Ted Filon, although he might not necessarily have anything good to say about me, because I pretty much gave him a hard time, because he was the program director at GV 99.1 when I started out in radio, and he was pretty much responsible for training me the old-fashioned way. It's through him I later on realized that all that I was able to do really well, and the fact that I've been able to have a good career in radio, I would have to say I owe to him and the way he taught me.
In your opinion, what's the state of Philippine radio today? Is it still relevant in this day and age where iPods and MP3 players now dominate society?
That's a good question. For a long time, the industry was actually a little nervous about whether or not radio would be still viable in the day and age of these digital players that would provide music on demand, your own personal, it's like your own personal radio station, so to speak. You get to play radio DJ, you program your own playlist, and then you take it with you wherever you go, listen to it at will, as you please. But fortunately, radio has survived because it provides, unlike just listening to a set of songs one after another, FM radio at least provides some personality in between the songs. So yes, I believe it has stood well in spite of technological advances such as iPods and similar devices.
What do you think of today's generation of radio listeners? What challenge do they pose for radio?
I think now, especially with the alternative of having things like the iPod, the radio listener of today is a lot more pickier because now he can choose. I've heard of listeners who chose to stop listening to the radio altogether when they couldn't find any good programs, find any DJs that they really enjoyed listening to, and they've gotten that picky and they said they would rather listen to their iPod. So I think that is the biggest challenge to be relevant and in general, it still goes back to being simply entertaining, to still be entertaining and relevant.
According to a reliable source, majority of the top 10 rating stations in Mega Manila comes from the so-called mass stations.
Mm-hmm.
In your own words, do they really fulfill the purpose of being mass-oriented since they are supposed to target all sectors of society?
Well, in terms of being able to hit the target market, I think they do it very well, and they know exactly what they're doing in spite of what other people may say or anything bad that people may think of throwing at them to pick on them, that they're not necessarily a good way to go about the radio business. But no, they're very effective in what they do. They make a lot of money, and the fact that they have a good and fairly large listener base is proof that whatever it is they're doing works. And I have to admit, it's no simple feat what they do. Even though it sounds like fun and games, there is quite a bit of work involved in making sure it sounds that way.
How do you see radio in 10 years?
I honestly haven't given it that much thought, but I'd like to think, radio pretty much doesn't change as aggressively as the other mediums, say TV or print, will do, or any other new form of medium such as what we have, like the World Wide Web, and which introduced the digital medium as a way to access information. I think in 10 years radio will still be there as the companion in the background for a lot of people, and that it has always been and still going. I'd like to think it'll still be going strong. I hope so, because I like my job.
How do you see yourself in 10 years? Will you still be in radio?
I should certainly hope so. I have to admit I wasn't sure that I would still be here, being able to contribute to like this type of radio station that I work for now. And I certainly hope I can, even though it may not be a job on the air, I still hope I can still be part of shaping this kind of radio station, this kind of radio format, one way or another, in 10 years from now.
For those who want to follow in your footsteps, do you have any piece of advice for them?
Stay in school. That's the best piece of advice I can give, just because I went about it the hard way. I was working in radio already at the time that I started in that I was still in school, rather. Yeah, I was already working in radio and going to school at the same time, and it is one of the toughest things to do. Unless you really have to do so, you should avoid it. Stay in school, and if you like radio, go for it. Give it a try. No matter if one program director or one person at the station you like that you apply to says no, try another radio station. Who knows? Eventually, you might find yourself at the station that you do want to be in or belong to.
U92, cool to be you.
Today back in 1992, 92-year-old Clarice Humphrey of Utah, Alabama, voted for Bill Clinton on the first ballot she had ever cast. She said her husband did not believe women should vote, so she never registered until after he died. Shame on him, huh?